new Supreme Court justice is important on a lot of levels, but I want to give you a little context and a little background in history. We are used to, in a modern times, we're used to having 9 members of the Supreme Court serve as our justices, Chief Justice and then associate justices. But that hasn't always been the case, and I think that's an important element, again, in history and perspective. We haven't always had 9. We've had fewer, particularly in early years in the founding of our country and through a good portion of our history. So that's an important perspective to have. We can probably manage with 8, but I think we are accustomed to, and we sometimes need a tie-breaking decision. So having 9 would be best in my opinion. But I think one of the reasons, to go back to your question more directly of why it's important, is because we've seen more and more that we've had to give decisions to the Supreme Court when our legislators and when our executive branch and our legislative branch may not be able to come to agreement on the things that they want to propose or what they think is best for the American people. So our courts are having to make more decisions for us, and having to use, one of the most treasured documents, in our country, in the Constitution, and apply it to some of these very, very difficult decisions that our country is facing. So not only at the Supreme Court level, but at all the lower courts in our country have a very vital role of administering justice and administering fairness. So I think that it is really important for any president that comes in to make sure they can look themselves in the eye and say they are selecting the best person out there to serve in this position that will have an impact on decisions in our country for years and years and years to come. So I believe in our court system. I believe in our legal system. I know it has challenges. I think in some of my travels around the world where I've helped to monitor elections in other countries that were struggling with free and fair elections, it's always the legal system and the court system that protects an average citizen of a country. So that's why courts are really important, to have the best people out there and that use the document, our Constitution, as the basis for every decision that they make.
I'm now at a part of the Department of Justice called the Community Relations Service. Maybe I was told I could take you on a tour of my office, if that's okay. So most people have never heard of this program. So this is a copy of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Hopefully you've studied this in your classes. This was the law that basically said you can't have racial segregation in public accommodations. So into that law was written this program called the Community Relations Service, because the president at that time, Lyndon Johnson, knew you can't have a law that just says no more discrimination in public accommodations, and then tomorrow everybody's just going to follow that. Especially in different parts of the country, they were going to say, heck no, we're not going to do that, and maybe use violence to keep people of color out of restaurants, out of libraries, out of community spaces based on race. So what we do is we drop our negotiators into sort of hotspots, crisis areas, where you have conflict based on race. Also, when you have conflict based on religion, sexual orientation, or national origin.
I think the fact that the Electoral College means that some people's votes count less actually depresses voter turnout. I'm originally from New York City. I don't know if you guys can hear my accent or not, but New York is a very crowded place. There's, I think, 13 million people altogether in New York City, but your vote for president doesn't count that much when you live in New York City, because like we all know it's going to go blue. It's always going to be a Democratic area. So I think for people who maybe aren't Democrats, that's like a good reason to stay home. And you're right, the fact that in the past 16 years we've had 2 elections where someone won the popular vote and didn't win the Electoral college vote has a negative effect on turnout. I believe that to be true.